I'm Paul Germain, and welcome to another session of Smart Boating. We're here today to talk about a really interesting subject that affects a lot of boat owners, and that's the discoloring or the chalking and fading that happens with a lot of fiberglass hulls these days. And joining me today to look into this subject and look at some different ways to solve that is Jody Wilkinson of Wilco Marine here in Newbury, Mass. Welcome, Jody.
Thanks, Paul. Happy to be here.
Great. You know, Jody, before we get into any show, I always like to help the viewers understand what the background is of the person I'm talking to in terms of their personal background with boating and any sort of background they can share about their company. Can you give us a couple highlights?
Sure, Paul. I own and manage Wilco Marine. I started the company in 1980, and I got involved at an early age restoring boats with my father, and we've worked on a range of boats from major restorations to factory recalls to plugs and molds.
Wow, the whole gamut of stuff.
Yes.
Cool, very cool. Well, you certainly have the credentials to get the show done today where we're going to talk about this whole chalking of hulls and fitting of hulls subject. So why don't we get right into it, because we've got a lot of stuff to show people today.
Okay, Paul.
Well, Jody, you know fiberglass has been around a long time, since the mid-'60s, for a lot of good reasons. It's been a very popular material. It's very strong. It's easy to mold into different beautiful shapes. Big advantage is it typically doesn't leak, which is a big advantage over the wooden craft. And then, and it requires typically fairly moderate maintenance compared to the wooden boats of the old days. But you know, there's something, as I mentioned earlier, that's been plaguing a lot of people, and that is that the surface coat or the gel coat of their boats are chalking and they're fading. And it's not just unique to old craft, but new craft as well. And it's bothered some people so much they reach for the buffing machine every spring before they put their boat in, or they might even be thinking about getting a new boat. And I thought we'd just take a minute or two to share with the viewers your thoughts on why that condition is happening. Why is the chalking happening? Are there 4 or 5 reasons that this is happening?
Well, Paul, you're right. That affects many boaters today. Let's look at the reasons why chalking and fading happens.
Okay.
And you'll be able to see why buffing is a short-term fix.
Yep.
And there are 5 major reasons, and in my experience, that's what I think 5 major reasons are.
Okay.
And the first one is uncured temperature. It burns the gel coat from within.
All right.
And there's many reasons for this. This is a little model we have here.
Okay.
And what you do first is you gel coat this to about 20 mils thick.
All right.
And what happens is a lot of factories will puddle all along the transom area and the strakes and the chines.
Difficult to be even in all the areas.
Right, so then it gets to like 30 mils.
Okay.
And now that starts burning in those areas.
Oh, okay.
And that's a big problem.
All right, so that's the first reason that someone could end up with chalking down the road.
Right.
What's the next one? What's the next one?
Well, number 2 is heat buildup in the mold, and that usually comes from when you're doing laminating.
All right.
And here's a little boat that was done.
Okay.
And so first what they do is they'll skin out a boat with like an 1.5 ounce mat. And there's no problem there.
Okay, so they'll lay it in the mold.
Right.
Okay.
And what happens then is they start piggybacking the layers, which means multiple layers.
Layer upon layer.
Right, and they'll use knitted fabrics and different materials. And what it does is it traps the heat in because they're building too fast.
Okay.
And it needs to exotherm the styrene out of the mold. And what it does is it traps it in when you piggyback. So that's where you get the shrinkage and the burning. Oh,
okay. All right. So those are 2 reasons.
And then the third one is premature release and popping. And it's basically the same thing. It's overbuilding too quick, building too fast, and it'll actually pop out of the mold.
Really?
And you'll see it in sides of hull. You see the hulls that are wavy.
And distorted.
And, yes. And so that's the problem with premature popping. So
popping it too early from the mold.
Right. And then number 4 would be the gel coat surface, the pores. I don't know if your camera can pick this up for the viewers, but if they have a problem with the boat and they pop it, what they do is they sand the gel coat and buff it.
Yes.
Well, now you open the surface up.
Yes.
And now dirt and contaminants will get caught in there.
All right.
And it will show like 6 to 8 months afterwards.
Oh boy. So even at the new factory, they're trying to touch it up a little bit, and they create a situation that down the road, causes this chalking and fading.
And it looks good, but you know, it'll come back.
For a short term.
Right.
Now there's one other reason too that's a very important one, right?
Yeah, and number 5 is the last 15 years they've added a lot of additives to gel coat.
Okay.
And so it seems to fade even quicker these days.
Yeah. Wow.
So
okay.
that's a big problem.
Yeah, a lot of additives.
So buffing is a very short-term fix, and you know, it can't really deal with the real problem here.
Okay. All right. And I know there's a couple different roads people can go down once they realize buffing is not going to be their solution. So let's get into that.
Okay.
Jody, we just talked about the fact that there's 5 primary causes that you've seen that have resulted in this chalking, fading condition in hulls, whether they be new or old. And there seems to be 2 basic paths. One of them is to put new gel coat on a surface, and the other is to use a polyurethane paint, like could be from DuPont or Interlux or All Grip. There's some different alternatives out there. Can you share with us a little bit about some of the advantages of re-gel coating a boat or pieces of a boat?
Well, those are your basic choices.
Okay.
But I recommend gel coat if the boat's less than 4 years old.
All right.
Just for resale purposes.
Okay. Okay. And we've got an example here. What can you tell us about this example in terms of the advantages of re-gel coating something?
Well, in this typical boat, we put a little 6-inch lift in this, and we changed the whole console over, and we put a little visor in, and changed the whole boat for the customer.
Okay.
But the good part of gel coat here, the interior of the boat was nice shape.
Yes.
So now we tinted this to match the interior of the
Okay.
boat.
All right.
And so you didn't have to all grip the whole interior. So gel coat's the way to go here.
So it's a nice match. How about durability? Does it hold up well?
Yes, it does. I mean, it doesn't chip, it doesn't ding.
Okay.
You know, and if it does chip or ding, it's easy to repair.
Easy to touch up. Okay, so it's got some really solid advantages if you want to re-gel coat your hull or a surface like this.
Yes.
How about some disadvantages in terms of does it have a finite life, or are there any other aspects of it there are
Yes, Paul.
you have to consider?
There's like a 5-year lifespan these days.
Okay.
And you know, it will fade and chalk up.
All right.
It's, you know, you can still apply it, but you know, it's orange peely. You have to wet sand and buff it. It's a little bit harder to like spray the side of a hull.
Okay. All right. And of course, you can get some contaminants in it as well, and you can get that deterioration of the surface that way too.
Once
right?
you open the pores up of gel coat, it causes contaminants to go right at it, and that's why you have to buff it, then wax it.
Okay. So it can be a good alternative. But there's
Yes.
some pros and cons with it.
There's some maintenance.
Now let's say we compare that to a polyurethane finish, whether again it's one of these ones made from the different manufacturers. What do you see as the, well, let's talk about the drawbacks first. So if someone says, what would be the things that would be against a polyurethane paint? I mean, is it tricky to apply, or are there some expenses involved? What does the scenario look like in
Well,
that?
like all grip, it is expensive to apply.
Okay.
And you have to have a controlled environment.
All right.
And all grip will scratch easier than gel coat.
Okay. All right. So those are some of the negatives. How about the positives? What does it do well? What do those type of paints do well?
Well, for one, you get a real deep finish.
Okay.
And 2, it's ease of maintenance.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's very easy to take care of. Color match is excellent.
Beautiful. How about length? Does it last long time?
15
Good
to
life?
20 years you can get out a good job if you take care of it.
Wow. So it's got some great length.
Yes, it does.
Super. Well, listen, we've got some really neat photos that we took. Were taken by one of your customers. It's some work you did. So I want to show people some of the tools you use first, and then we're going to get right into those photos.
Sure, Paul.
Okay, good. Jody, you know, in the work you do, you use a variety of tools that we're going to see involved in those different photographs of the restoration you did on the gel coat. Can you just take a minute to share with our viewers some of the tools we've got laid out here on the table?
Sure, Paul. This here is a 30-inch sanding board. It's actually a fairing block, and that helps fair the hull.
Okay.
And in the same family, we have a little 16-inch sanding block.
Okay.
And we have little hand ones here. And then we go into the 16-inch air file. It's very important.
Yeah.
And then we come into a little vibrator. It's a 7x3.
Okay.
And we have little detail files here that help us all around the tight areas. Little 3-inch orbital sanders, little 1.25 inch sanders.
Wow.
And then we get into the big boys, the 8-inch orbital sanders. And then we have all different array of orbital sanders here.
Okay.
Some are more aggressive than the others,
Yeah.
and some are finer.
Yep.
And then we get into the different buffing tools here.
Yep.
And then we get into the pressure pot. And this is pretty complicated because you have to have different needles and different adjustments for all applications. Primers are thicker,
All right.
and paints and top coats and clears.
So we'll be hearing a lot about that as we move through the
Yes.
pictures.
Yes.
Okay, well that's a great orientation. Why don't we start to take a look at some of those shots and guide the reader or the viewer through the sequence of applying a process like this.
Okay, Paul.
Great. Okay, Jody, this is we've got 4 pictures of the boat that show the condition of it prior to refurbishing it. This looks like it's about a 26-footer.
Yes, Paul, it's a 26-40er.
Okay, and it's a relatively recent boat. It looks like the sort of boat that might be popular in the Northeast.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take another look at a shot. This shot really starts to show some of the chalkiness that we've talked about here early in the show, doesn't it?
Yes, the boat's badly faded and it has a lot of shrinkage in it.
Okay. All right. Now we've got another shot here as well. Now you can see a lot of this chalkiness you've just talked about, and particularly around the chine. What's going on there?
Yeah, the first 18 inches up, that's where the water hits and bounces off the sunlight, and that's what makes your boat fade even quicker.
Okay, so that's a particularly a troublesome spot in terms
Yes.
of this chalking and fading.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, all right. And let's look, we've got one more picture of the kind of pre-work. This is a shot down the side of the boat. A lot of chalking on here. What's that coming from?
Yeah, there's a lot of chalking and fading, and there's a lot of shrinkage. And once again, the gel coat, going back to the mold process, it was built too quick, and the heat buildup actually burns the gel coat.
Okay.
And it takes the life out of it.
Okay. And the sun is probably reflecting off the water a lot here too, right?
And that's forcing it to also.
Right. Okay. Well, good. Well, that's a good introduction. Let's move on to the next series of shots to see kind of how the process goes.
Okay, Paul.
Well, Jody, here we are at the first step. This is the, I think you referred to as the boarding process. What exactly is going on here, and what are you doing with it, and why?
Well, Paul, what we're doing here, we're using the 30-inch sanding board, and we're taking off all the high spots to show us actually all the low spots and the high spots. And it's telling us a little story about the boat,
Okay.
where the bad areas are, where we have to concentrate more than others.
Okay, all right. All right, so this is kind of the first step in the process. Now,
Yes.
we've got one other shot here. We can see again the result of that. Is this normal? In other words, as you look at boats that are undergoing this refinishing process, is this a typical first step to getting a high quality job?
Yes, it is, Paul. A lot of boats suffer from major heat shrinkage. And once you start sanding with an air file or a 30-inch board file, you get to see all the low spots, and it really brings everything into play.
Okay, all right. So that's not, it's not unusual, and it's not specific to this boat. Most boats could benefit from this type of treatment prior to getting the polyurethane
Yes,
paints
many
on them.
boats. Yes.
Okay.